Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Friday Ramblings. I am your perpetual host. I'm the Bardic one, and we're going to jump back into some wrestling championship history with a belt that's a little bit different than most of the other ones we talk about, and that is the WCW World Television Championship. And this was a title that was around for a good almost 40 years. As it was originally created in 1974 and was retired in 2000. So, yeah, about 36 years. Real quick, we're going to go through the background and then get to the fun of these championship history breakdowns, which is discussing some of the individual champions. See how many of them you know of. So the title was originally created in 1974 by Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, later more famously known as Jim Crockett Promotions, as a secondary title. It was initially known simply as the Mid-Atlantic Television Championship. However, as the Mid-Atlantic territory grew, the title became known as the NWA World Television Championship, and in 1991 as the WCW World TV Championship. Now, the title is often defended in matches with a time limit of 10 or 15 minutes, and much more often than other championships, this shorter time limit meant that many bouts would end at a time limit draw, especially when the champion was a heel, as this allowed them to get heel heat by escaping by the skin of their teeth and winning on a technicality instead of a true blue clean victory. Thus, building heat towards the champion eventually losing their title because, it's not like you really properly won a lot of those matches anyway. Time limit draws don't count. Good times. Now, there's a couple major versions of the belt. The original NWA version of the belt had the logos of the major television networks in the USA, at that time NBC, CBS, and ABC, on either side of the belt, along the little strap facings. While the 1992 to 1995 WCW version of the belt had the TBS logo on both sides because, of course, at that point they were owned by Ted Turner, and WCW was a Turner property. And of course, as I said, that was only the 92 to 95 version of the belt. Post 95, having individual, easily recognized network logos kind of faded out on the belt design. Simply having standardized WCW faceplates. And as we said, the title was retired in 2000, around about a year or so before the company itself folded, and along with a lot of the other subsidiary programming, as at this point WCW knew things were going bad and were scrambling and trying to do a lot of changes, and a lot of the old traditional stuff like the syndicated programming that harkened back to the Jim Crockett era was axed as they tried to compartmentalize and streamline WCW programming in an attempt to improve it. This meant, of course, getting rid of some of the belts. So, let's go through a list of champions and see, as I said before, how many of them you know, and who can really claim to have been iconic television champions. Let's have the fun. It's data breakdown time. Real quick history. The original champion was a gentleman named Danny Miller who defeated Ole Anderson in a tournament final to become the first NWA Mid-Atlantic Television Champion. The title would later be held by Ivan Koloff before being won by Paul Jones, who lost it back to Ivan Koloff, who lost it back to Paul Jones, who would lose it to young up-and-comer named Ric Flair. Ric Flair himself would have the then longest reign at 181 days, vastly eclipsing most of the runs at that point. Paul Jones would eventually win it back, holding it for 117 days before he vacated it due to winning the NWA Mid-Atlantic United States Heavyweight Championship. Real quick for modern wrestling fans who are like, oh, what's that got to do with anything? In classic modern wrestling classic modern would be kind of a contradiction in terms. In classic professional wrestling territories, unlike modern times, which is how that sentence should have been said the first time, champions were not allowed to hold more than one title at a time. Thus, when you won a championship, you would have to vacate the previous championship you had. We've touched on this before with some of our other championship breakdowns, but again, just in case this is the first time you've watched one of our championship breakdown videos, there's the rule for you. Angelo Mosco would later defeat Tim Woods in a tournament final to win the vacant championship. Tim Woods, for those of you who do know your wrestling history, is also known as Mr. Wrestling 1. Angelo Mosco is also known occasionally as King Kong Mosco and the Mighty Hercules. Paul Jones would win it back, however, dropping it to Angelo Mosco about a month and a half later, who would hold it for 66 days before losing it to the aforementioned Tim Woods under his Mr. Wrestling persona. However, it would be only a few weeks before he lost it to Greg Valentine, who in turn, about 3 weeks later, lost it to Rufus R. Jones, occasionally known as Freight Train Jones, who held it for just shy of 2 months before Greg Valentine won it, for a few more weeks before losing it back to Rufus. And then our buddy Ric Flair comes back, holding it for 72 days, dropping it to another young up-and-comer, Ricky Steamboat, in one of the earliest matches in their on and off, many, many years-long feud. At this point, the title became simply known as the NWA Television Championship. Ricky Steamboat would later lose it to Baron Von Raschke, who would lose it to Johnny Weaver, who would lose it back to Raschke, who would lose it to Paul Jones, back again, who would go on to hold it for an incredible 368 days, just over a year, winning it on June 7th, 1978, and losing it on June 10th, 1979, to Ricky Steamboat. Yep, there you go, folks. However, Ricky Steamboat would shortly thereafter win the NWA Mid-Atlantic Tag Team Championship with Jay Youngblood and have to vacate the TV title. The Masked Superstar, later known as Acts of Demolition, Bill Eadie, would win a tournament for the vacant championship. However, he himself would turn around and vacate it when he entered the tag team ranks only a few months later. In a tournament final, perennial champion Paul Jones would lose to Roddy Piper, the Rowdy One. 87 days later, however, Piper also won the Mid-Atlantic United States Heavyweight Championship, like the aforementioned Ricky Steamboat. Wait, was it Ricky? No, excuse me, it was Paul Jones that had won that previously. My bad, that's what I get for running through my notes too quick. And he would have to vacate the championship. It would be won by a gentleman known then as Sweet Ebony Diamond, but more famously known as Rocky Johnson. Now, mostly known, well, besides the late Rocky Johnson, but known as the father of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Yep, well before he was the father of the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, Rocky was Sweet Ebony Diamond and winning plenty of titles of his own. However, only a week later, he would lose it to Greg Valentine, who lost it 24 days back to Sweet Ebony Diamond, who lost it 15 days later back to Greg Valentine, who would manage to hold it for 84 days before old outlaw Ron Bass came a-calling, holding it for about 2 months before losing it back to Ivan Koloff, who we have not seen for a while, but there you go. However, 2 months later, Jimmy Valiant would win it, holding it for an impressive 260 days. Joe LeDuc would win it, However, 37 days later, the title was stripped from him due to excessive cheating. A gentleman competing as Bad Leroy Brown won a 20-man battle royale to win the vacant championship, a month later dropping it to Mike Rotundo, also known occasionally as Michael Wall Street and Erwin R. Shyster, IRS. 2 months later, though, Dick Slater would win the title, holding it for just over a month before losing it back to Roddy Piper, who would hold it for a week before losing it back to Dick Slater, who 27 days later would lose it back to Joe LeDuc, who 23 days later would lose it to Great Kabuki, who helped stabilize the belt for a little bit with a 185-day reign. Eventually, though, Charlie Brown from out of town would win it at the Starrcade 83 event. This being the first time that the belt was actually competed for at a major event. Or rather, the title changed hands, I should say, at a major event. All previous ones having been at non-televised live events or the occasional episode of the weekly Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling show. And of course, Charlie Brown from out of town was previously known on our list as Jimmy Valiant, this being a masked gimmick he would don at a time when he was supposedly not working in the promotion and wanted to sneak one over on a naughty heel. However, because when Charlie Brown was unmasked as Jimmy Valiant, he had to vacate the title due to NWA rules, and Mark Youngblood would win a tournament final against Dick Slater, 3 weeks later losing it to Tully Blanchard, who would amass a most impressive 353-day reign. By this point, it was the NWA World Television Championship due to the growing influence of the NWA and Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling within the NWA. And the American Dream Dusty Rhodes would start a 43-day reign before Tully Blanchard won it back for 69 days, before Dusty Rhodes won it for 105 days, before vacating the title due to an injury. The Enforcer, Arn Anderson, defeats Wahoo McDaniel in a tournament final to claim the belt for 248 days before Dusty Rhodes finally comes back and wins it back. 79 days later, though, he drops to Tully Blanchard, who picks up another 263 days as champion. However, at a live event, Nikita Koloff would win the championship, holding it for 162 days, during which, at the Starrcade 87 event, Koloff would defeat Terry Taylor to unify the NWA World Television Championship with the UWF Television Championship as part of the UWF Invasion storyline. Also, during this standpoint on make sure I'm getting a... No, excuse me. Next champion would be Mike Rotunda, again, who during his 335-day reign, the belt would be renamed the World Championship Wrestling Television Championship due to the promotion changing its name to WCW. Mike's almost year-long reign would end at the hands of Rick Steiner at another Starrcade event, holding it for 56 days before losing it back to Mike at the Chi-Town Rumble event in Chicago. However, this was only a 39-day reign before the man called Sting won it in Atlanta, Georgia for 114 days before vacating it due to a controversial finish to a match between Sting and the Great Muta. Muta himself would win the vacated belt in a rematch with Sting, holding it for 121 days before Arn Anderson would win it, notching another 336 days as champion to his record before Tom Zink, known at the time as the Z-Man, picked up a month-plus reign. However, Arn Anderson gained it back, and 132 days later, dropped it to Bobby Eaton, who'd only hold it for 15 days after winning it at the first Super Brawl, to a young gentleman named Steve Austin, occasionally stunning, but more famously stone cold, who would hold it for a wondrous 329-day reign, dropping the belt to Barry Windham, who would hold it for 26 days before Steve Austin won it back for another 102 days, losing it at Clash of the Champions 20 to our old buddy Ricky Steamboat, who 27 days later lost it to Scott Steiner. However, Scott was stripped of the title after he and his brother Rick Steiner left for the World Wrestling Federation. Paul Orndorff would defeat Eric Watts in the tournament final, become the new champion. Months later, having 169 days for at Clash of the Champions 24, Ricky Steamboat would win it. During this time period, WCW officially withdrew from the NWA, and the title became sole ownership of WCW. Lord Steven Regal, better known these days as William Regal, everybody's favorite English gentleman hooligan, would win it and go on a 225-day reign at Fall Brawl before Larry Zbyszko won it, holding it for just under 2 months. Lord Steven Regal would win it back for 87 days before dropping it to Johnny B. Bad, later known in WWE as Mark Marrow, who went on a 112-day reign before Arn Anderson won his belt back, holding it for 161 days until the Great American Bash 1995, when he lost it in an infamous match to the Renegade, everybody's least favorite Ultimate Warrior ripoff gimmick. And I am not even kidding. Like, they promoted it like as if this was the Ultimate Warrior. They hyped this mystery opponent like it was supposed to be the Ultimate Warrior. Legally, they couldn't officially say it was the Ultimate Warrior because he wasn't actually under contract yet. And then they trot out this guy who's basically cosplaying the Ultimate Warrior. It was not a good gimmick. It did not end well for the gentleman in general. That's definitely a story for another time, though. However, 91 days later, Diamond Dallas Page would win it at Fall Brawl, but only for 42 days when Halloween Havoc came around and Johnny B. Bad won it back. 111 days later, though, he would drop it to Lex Luger, but only for a single day before Johnny B. Bad won it back for another 17 days, and then Lex Luger would win it, managing to hold it for 167 days before Lord Steven Regal out-wrestled him and probably stretched him a couple times in the process, notching 181 days before Prince Iaukea won it 49 days, losing it to the Ultimate Champion, Ultimo Dragon, one of the true greats. We'll probably do an entire video on Ultimo Dragon and his impact on professional wrestling another time. Who ran it for a month before losing it to Alex Wright, who a month later would lose it to Disco Inferno, who 42 days later would lose it to Perry Saturn, who would lose it back to Disco Inferno, who would lose it to Booker T. And 49 days later, he lost to Rick Martel for a week before Booker T won it back for 61 days. And then we get an infamous series of house show events where Chris Benoit won it for a day before losing it back to Booker T, who a day later lost it back to Chris Benoit, who a day later lost it back to Booker T, who a day later lost it to Fit Finlay at a Nitro taping, with the commentators at Nitro not acknowledging the switches between Chris Benoit and Fit Finlay at the house shows. The title acknowledgement only coming up in later wrestling history documentation. And Booker T would eventually win it back from Fit Finlay at the Great American Bash in 1998, before dropping it to real-life brother Stevie Ray. Stevie Ray claimed the title, saying he was given power of attorney by Booker T to defend the title due to him not being allowed to compete due to injury. However, Chris Jericho would win the title at Nitro, hold it for 112 days before losing it to Conan, who a month later lost it to Scott Steiner. Yeah. Fast forward a few years before you win your belt back. There's Scotty, who 76 days later would lose it back to Booker T, who held it 56 days before losing it to Rick Steiner at Slamboree. 127 days later, he would lose it back to Chris Benoit on a Nitro, who would lose it 41 days later to Rick Steiner, who held it for 28 days before losing it to Scott Hall at Mayhem, one of the later named WCW pay-per-views. This is bringing us all the way up to 1999, who held it for a week before vacating it via throwing the belt into a trash can. This was on November 29th. At February 19th, Jim Duggan, everybody's favorite Hacksaw, ho! would dig the title out of the trash and proclaim himself the new champion, holding it for 54 days before the reboot era, in which all champions were stripped and new champions were crowned in a series of tournaments, took place. But the TV title was never actually rebooked in a tournament. It was retired at this point. So, let's go through our list of combined reigns. Booker T has the most reigns at 6, with a combined days of 204. Arn Anderson has the most combined days at 877 over 4 reigns. However, right below him at 685 over 3 reigns is Tully Blanchard. The longest single reign belongs to the Great Kabuki at 185 days. The shortest reigns, of course, would be those between, as I said, Booker T and Chris Benoit, who swapped them back and forth at house shows. Of course, their combined total eventually added up and increased. The least amount of time spent with the belt would go to Rick Martel, who had a single reign of 6 days. Not counting, I should say a little bit of a weird oddity in this is Bill Eadie's one reign under his masked superstar gimmick, due to the fact that as the title was vacated during an undisclosed time, somewhere between him winning it on April 1st, 1980, and Roddy Piper winning it on November 1st. Nobody's sure exactly how many days he actually had the belt, due to the vacating not being explicitly stated on a specific date on TV, as this was 1980 and most stuff was still going on at live events. But we do know he held it more than 6 days. So, what comes down to it is the TV title important? Yes. We've named many people here who would go on to iconic Hall of Fame careers. Barry Windham, Dusty Rhodes, Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, Ric Flair, Steve Austin, William Regal, Fit Finlay, Booker T, Diamond Dallas Page. And yes, we did bring up everybody's least favorite name in wrestling, Chris Benoit. I'm going to go ahead and state this, because the name is going to come up a couple more times as we continue to go through various WCW titles. I know we've mentioned before when going through a couple WWE titles. Our stance here at Roulette Productions is that we do not necessarily endorse anything Chris Benoit did in his personal life or put him up on any sort of pedestal as a professional wrestler. We simply acknowledge that he existed in professional wrestling history and did win certain championships. That is all we are doing. We are acknowledging his existence. We are not endorsing or supporting anything. I have my personal feelings on Chris Benoit, but it does not reflect anything Roulette Productions is officially trying to do while discussing title histories. We do not erase history that makes us uncomfortable. That is how we roll here at Roulette Productions. And of course the aforementioned other Chris Jericho, who is still continuing to wrestle to this day, unlike many of those iconic Hall of Famers we mentioned. Many of whom are no longer with us. Oh, and of course Mike Rotundo, who is part of a major wrestling family. His children continuing to wrestle to this day in various forms. As we said before, the fact that the TV title is often defended under short time limit rules helped distinguish it and give it its own identity amidst the backdrop of things like the United States Championships and the NWA World Championship. The fact that it was a bit of an open weight title as opposed to an official heavyweight belt or a light heavyweight / cruiserweight title, which is, something that has existed. We've discussed some of these. We'll discuss some more of these later. It was a fun championship. It was competed at, as we said, a lot of house shows, a lot of television events, a few pay-per-views over the years. And the idea of it was later used in various other promotions in different ways. As we said before, there was a UWF Television Championship. Smoky Mountain Wrestling had a variant of it where instead of it being competed under shorter time limits, the idea was that you would make, I believe it was, if you made it through 5 successful title defenses, the belt was vacated and you were given a cash prize. I believe it was 5. Let me double check that real quick. Yeah, the SMW Beat the Champ Television Championship. Champion would defend his title every week against a randomly drawn opponent. For each successful defense of the belt, the wrestler won $1,000. Yet, the champion could win 5 title matches in a row. Then the title was vacated and the champion received a $5,000 bonus, which would total out to $10,000. Counting the individual $1,000 bonuses and the bonus at the end for stacking up 5. Which is all good. As such, if you have access to the WWE Network and thus WCW archives, I would highly suggest hunting down various television championship matches. Pick your decade, pick your favorite decade of wrestling. You will find a television championship match that is worth watching. It was, in many incarnations, a definite workhorse title. Great technical wrestlers, people who got over because they were great in the ring, such as an Arn Anderson and a Ric Flair. Well, Ric Flair is a little bit of everything. He's cheating, but your Arn Andersons, your Barry Windhams, your Greg Valentines. These were guys who were known much more for what they did in between the ropes than any talking they did in interviews. Not that they couldn't cut good interviews, but their wrestling was exceptional level. With that, we're going to leave you. As I've said before, October is a theme month, so we will not be discussing any championship belt history in October. We will be back in November, though. And that will be fun times. More wrestling championship history, because there are so many interesting championships to go through, many of which are continuing to influence things to this day. We do not have a current direct television championship in a major promotion, but you never know what's going to happen. Certainly, the closest thing I would say we have as a reference to that is AEW's TBS and TNT Championships, which are named after the networks that AEW programming has aired on. They're not defended under classic television championship rules, but the naming conventions do harken back to the idea of a television championship, them being network championships, essentially. Still, we'll be back in 7 days with a non-wrestling championship related topic. And until then, I hope you stay happy, healthy, and that you continue to watch Roulette Production videos. Bye-bye, folks.